Alrighty, YouTube, here's my explanation of costs that have occurred and what kind of the whole trip cost for taking step vans or box trucks or RVs for RV transport. I did a trip to San Francisco, California for Synergy. It was roughly 2,000 miles, a little over that, I think. And it paid roughly right around $1,800. It's not exact figures, but I'm giving you the basics of it. I paid about a $300 ticket for the plane flight back. I could walk across the interstate or over the overhead pass of the interstate from the FedEx drop off to the airport. So I saved on having to buy public transportation to get to the airport. But then $300 worth of a ticket to go from San Francisco. I don't remember now if it was Seattle or Denver. Might have been, I think it was Denver that I flew into, and then Denver to Chicago. Well, that was the $300 ticket. Then it cost me the $5 to get on the L train and ride from Chicago O'Hare across down to downtown Chicago to get to the Greyhound bus stop, which then I had to pay $40 worth to take the L cart. I forget what they call it, Miller bus or Browder bus or something like that, after the L cart, 4 stops, for a grand total of $1,355 is what I had at that point. But they also take out $120 with escrow. Escrow is basically your damage deposit. They take out a portion until they get to $1,500 worth, and that is in case you damage the rig at all. They can pay basically their insurance, the difference of their insurance, their what they would have to pay into it. I can't think of the word, but they basically make the driver pay what they would have to pay into it, insurance to cover it. And so they pull a little bit of money out of each trip. It takes about 10 or 15 trips to get your escrow saved up, unless you pay them $1,500 down for them to have. But that money is your money, obviously. If they don't use it, if you're a safe driver and they don't ever have to end up using it and whatnot, and if they do use it, you just restart the escrow from what they had to use and keep on going with them if that's what you want to do. Or but you're only out the $1,500 instead of being out of $70,000 or $100,000 rig that you're responsible for. So, end of the day's profit would be $1,235. This is not counting my food and not counting hotels. This is literally just counting driving it there and getting yourself back to the point where you started at. And that's it. I didn't count in the hotels because hotels vary. Some people can go stay at the Motel 6 and they get 40 or 60 bucks a night or whatever. Just some other people stay at the Holiday Inn Express, like me, not saying one's any better than the other. But you pay 80 or 90 or $100 a shot for the, to stay there for the points and whatnot on it. I stay at both kinds of hotels, so I don't distinguish between the two. Every now and then I'll stay at a Motel 6. If it's easier to get to, mostly I go by location, but if the location has a nicer property and I can afford it, I go with the nicer properties. But anyway, so that's why I didn't count the difference in hotels in there, because everybody's different. Some people don't even bother with the hotel. And there's one guy that I know of that apparently bikes all the way back across country. He takes his bicycle with him, and then he just bikes and camps out all the way across country, and that would be the way to save if you could afford to do that. If you wanted to do that, I'm not going to do it, but I'm saying that'd be one hell of a way to do it, to support your life. You bike out to California from Indiana, and then, either just bike around in California to the next place if you're working for Pinnacle and take their stuff, or else you bike all the way back to Indiana. But anyway, going back to this paper, so you could potentially get about $1,235 profit if you don't count your food and your hotel. I'm just giving you kind of a balance of what it would take. 2,000 miles took roughly 4 days, because it's 500 miles a day. Excuse me, roughly, that you can take. You basically max your hours at about 500 miles, somewhere between 500 and 600 miles is the most you can drive because of e-logs anyways. So I just try to aim for 500 miles a day. Makes life easier to add it up. So, and then there's no reason to stress yourself out trying to drive longer. It's not expediting. It's, you can take it as you go. As long as the dealer's fine with getting it there whenever you ask for the time to deliver, then you're good to go. So anyway, 4 days worth of work, you could get about $1,200, give or take, worth of profit off of. And that's just counting the trip there and getting yourself back, and that's it. I'm not counting any hotel stays that you stay in between time or anything else. Next is a 1,500 mile run that I took for Pinnacle. Paid $1,500, a little over $1,500, because Pinnacle actually pays $1 a mile or slightly more. Synergy pays about 75, 80 cents, and sometimes 90 cents. Their loads vary. Pinnacle's usually always at above $1 a mile. So the easiest way to add up Pinnacle is just do it at $1 a mile. So it's 1,500 miles, $1,500. I know they paid me a little more than that, I think, but they took it out in escrow, so it don't matter. But anyway, I got there and I took a $40 small Cessna airplane from Haver, Montana, down to Billings because the laundry guy that I delivered to said it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and it kind of was. I'm glad I took the experience, but I probably should have just came back on the Amtrak. I might have saved, well, I don't know if I'd have saved anything, because Amtrak cost about the same as what you can see there in bus rides and Lyft and plane anyway. Either way, I think I would have been in a wash. But anyway, then I took a $26 lift in Billings to go down the hill from the airport to the bus station. Then I got on a bus that went all the way across country for $100 to South Bend, I think it was. I could not, if I booked Chicago, or Billings to Chicago, it was like 170. Billings to Elkhart was like 150. Billings to Goshen was like 180. But for some reason, Billings to South Bend, Indiana, right in the middle of Chicago and Elkhart, basically, was $100. So I took that bus, went to Chicago's depot on that bus, and as it was still going and had time to do it, I went inside and got another $40, or it wasn't 40, it was 10, so this is wrong. I just noticed that's a boo-boo. Just a second. I just paid for 10 or 12 bucks worth of another bus extension out to Elkhart, and gave the driver it and kept on going. But if you'd have gone by the computer, I would have ended up having to pay $170 for that same distance. So with the Greyhound, you have to watch what they do, because their automatic computer system will pretty much rip you off unless you're looking for the deals. And through doing this, I was able to discover a $100 bus across country, and then $10 to get to where I wanted to go. It was $110 altogether, instead of $170 or $180. I've seen in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that has the same issue. They have what they call an express bus that you can take that goes from Minneapolis to Chicago for pretty cheap. It was like $65, and that's the one I have coming up next. And then you take the Elkhart bus out there for $40 from Chicago. And all in all, it costs you like $115 or $105 or something like that. But if you tried to book Minneapolis all the way to Elkhart where you wanted to go, it'd be $182. So it's a difference of $80 in just looking around and cost, and which places you can go for cheaper. So whenever I go through Minneapolis or start in Minneapolis, I always book it right to Chicago, and then book another bus from that, because it ends up being cheaper to take the two different connections. You just have to watch that, because if the one bus makes you miss the other connection, it's not their fault anymore, it's yours, because they didn't set that connection up, you did. So I always try to get the bus that's a couple hours later or something, and you might have a little bit of layover in Chicago to do that. But I'd much rather do that than have the first bus break down and screw me out of the second bus, because they will put you on another bus, but it won't be for 24 hours without adjusting it. If you adjust it with them, it'll cost you $20. So, you know, here or there on whether you want to do that or not. But anyway, we'll go back to this one. So this is the profit is $1,294, as you see. Minus about $120 worth of escrow again for Pinnacle. Ended up being $1,174 for 1,500 miles. $1,235 for 2,000 miles. You can see the difference here. 1,500 is almost more of the sweet spot, because you get paid more. I mean, if you get up to 2,000 miles, you get paid a little more, but it's not really worth the extra 600 miles that you end up driving. 500 or 600 miles worth, you know what I mean? So 1,500 is actually kind of the sweet spot, because as you'll see, the short runs kind of pay a little bit better in terms of ending profit, but then they're also short runs, and they're kind of annoying, because you can drive that 530 miles in one day, and that's roughly, if you watch your brakes and you drive all day long and only take the minimum fuel breaks and the 30-minute lunch break that you have to take within an 8-hour time driving. If you only take those breaks and you drive straight through that whole day, you can drop it off that day if you start early enough. You can get there by 5. Well, it's a little more hours than that, I guess, because it's roughly 6 hours driving. Because if you dispatch yourself at 60 miles an hour, the easiest way to add up what the mileage is going to be is you take the ending number, which is 500 miles, and you double that, so it'd be 10. So it'd be 10 hours worth of driving roughly with your brakes. And that's a little less. That's adding in, a couple hours worth of brakes, but your fuel, you'd be surprised how long filling up and washing the windows and taking your 30-minute required break and everything ends up adding up to. You'll end up using that hour or 2 hours worth of break time. So the easiest way to do it is to double it. take the 500 of 530 and you double it and make it 10 hours. Same thing here. If you go 1,500 miles, that would take you roughly 30 hours. And your 2,000 miles would take you roughly 40 hours. All you got to do is double the first letter, the first number, and you can guess roughly how long it's going to take you in drive time and brakes. And that is the distance-wise for the drive time. If you're dispatched at 60 miles an hour, we're actually dispatched about 65 miles an hour, but you can go between 65 and 70-ish, give or take, depending. You can get away with it here and there, but anyway, we're going to go over this last one for quality that I'm going to take here shortly. This is what tomorrow's run is going to be. I already looked into it already, so I know that I have to take a what amounts to about a $35 lift from Burnsville, which is a southern suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, down to downtown Minneapolis so I can get on the bus. There's a bus stop out there in the middle of nowhere that I'm going to look into that's closer to Burnsville, but then I'm sitting there at a bus stop with an electric ticket, and I don't know, online ticket I mean, and I don't know if I really badly want to do that or not. The safer route would be to go down to the home bus depot itself and get out on the bus that way, so I don't know. For $30 for peace of mind, that might be worth going. But anyway, $35 lift to downtown Minneapolis, and $65 bus that I was talking about, the express bus from Minneapolis to Chicago. It's usually packed, but you save on that money. And then you buy the $40 bus from Chicago out to Elkhart or Goshen or wherever. It costs roughly about $40. And you end up with about $364 profit. But then I also forgot to add in that they're going to take a little bit of escrow. They don't take as much on that. I don't know what quality takes for escrow, but I would guess probably like 80, or let's just say the $64 worth. So let's say roughly $300 worth profit, give or take. On that one, and again, none of these are counting food or hotel. I just thought I'd write it down for you so you can kind of know what to expect. Some people take more expensive airplane tickets and they don't care. Some people take as dirt cheap of the bus. Some people know of better deals that go from Minneapolis to Chicago, and I heard at one time that there's a bus that goes for like $17, but it's off in Buku Land bus stop somewhere. You gotta find it, and not a bus depot. And so I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. But I'm just saying there are deals out there if you really get to looking on the apps. Rome to Rio is a good app to have, and then Road Trippers app is a good app to have, and then Trucker's Path is another good app to have that'll help you avoid overpasses, and it'll give you places for diesel fuel, which is kind of hard to find if you don't just look up a truck stop. Diesel fuel pumps are interesting because 1 in every 5 gas stations actually has one or something. The rest of them, the smaller regular gas stations don't usually have diesel. In my experience, some small corner gas stations in the city, you know, so they're best off just trying to find a truck stop that would have diesel in front and back. Anyway, that's the gist of what you can expect to pay, you know, and it varies. Here in San Francisco, I think it was 2 nights for a pretty good deal at a Best Western Plus there, because it had a hot tub and a sauna and everything, so I stayed another night, and I didn't have to, but I paid basically a couple $100 to stay there, because might as well. It's the first time I've ever been to San Francisco, California, you know, might as well stay there a little bit. And the same here. This was out in Haver, Montana, and I stayed at both Best Western Pluses that were out there just to kind of work up the Best Western ladder in different properties that they own, so I can start to be top tier in their property. But anyway, and then didn't have to pay for that, but this one didn't have cruise, and so by the time I got to Glendive, Montana, which is 3/4 of the way there, my feet hurt so bad I went to a Holiday Inn Express there and stayed in Glendive, so I could soak my feet in a hot bath, because without cruise, that was pretty brutal. The things I have realized, if you want a nice cushy ride that pays decent, not the highest thing in the world, but the decent price, Synergy has all sorts of different prices and has nice and cushy units, and they also have step vans that are not so cushy. But you know what I mean? They had a Mercedes Galleria that I just drove the other day. I made a YouTube video about that had an adaptive cruise on it, and that thing was a breeze to drive even through Chicago. It stepped on the brakes itself. It stepped on the gas itself. It just did it all itself all the way through Chicago. That was amazing. But then I've also taken a rougher ride from Pinnacle. I've only taken the one route from Pinnacle, so I can't say that they all have the problem or not. I think that was a custom deal where that laundry van was hopefully the only thing that they have that didn't have cruise. But maybe if all their things only don't have crews, then I'll probably end up just taking 500-mile trips for Pinnacle, 1-day shot deals, because my foot's gonna hurt too much to take 1,500 miles again like that with no crews. But that wasn't a long diesel step van that was extended. That was a laundry van, and it was a decent ride. It was heavier than Synergy's step vans, but Pinnacle pays better than Synergy. Synergy pays roughly around 80 cents a mile. Pinnacle pays above $1 a mile, and it doesn't sound like much, but when you put 20 cents on every mile, that adds up real quick. You get a couple, $200 or $300 more than Synergy does. But they had a rougher ride, and I can't say for certain, that all their stuff's like that. But Pinnacle, from what I saw on their lot, only has step vans and box trucks. The box trucks will be decent to drive, but then staying someplace in the box truck overnight is gonna not be the greatest, because you don't have an actual bed. Like in Synergy, the RVs you can stay in the overhead loft, which is a decent extra bed. You can't stay in the main bed, but you can stay in the overhead loft. So there's added benefits for driving for Synergy. They have the cushy stuff to drive, and you can stay on their stuff in the extra beds. Pinnacle, you're kind of on your own with a step van. You have to just sleep on the floor or wherever. But it pays more. At the end of the day, that Pinnacle trip paid a lot more. I could stay 3 nights in a hotel during that week and still come off with decent profit. I came back home with $700, I think it was, extra profit, and after having spent the hotels and stuff. This is just a basic list of it without food and hotel added on. Quality here, I'm running a short run for quality, basically because I've got to stay somewhat close to Elkhart, because Monday I have classic transport. This is Monday. Today I was supposed to be at Indiana transport, but they didn't put me on the list, so I'm gonna have to push that back a few weeks. Don't know if I'm gonna end up reapplying to them or what. Don't know if I'm gonna keep going with them or not. I was kind of not very happy with my recruiter on that part, but it was partly my fault though too. But I have classic next Monday and Tuesday, and that means that I end up having to take short runs this week, because I cannot get stuck having to deliver on Monday someplace else when I need to be in Elkhart. So because of that, I asked for a shorter run, and he found this one. My dispatcher there found this one for 530 miles that goes to Burnsville, Minnesota, like I said. And I already looked it up, what all it's going to cost. And I'm not very happy about having to take this $65, what I call the ghetto express bus, because it's just loud and noisy, and there's drugs on it. Last time, people were trying to literally smoke drugs on the bus. It was like Ghettoville bus that was packed full of people, and I don't like that idea. But your only other option is to buy this bus package together and go straight from Minneapolis to Elkhart or Goshen or wherever, and you end up paying another $60 on top of this, $60 or $80 worth, depending on what the app says that you'll end up having to pay. But that is a through bus, what they call a through bus, which makes different stops, but it doesn't have kind of the express bus route, where the express bus was only supposed to stop in St. Paul and Toma, Washington, which is halfway in the middle for the lunch break, and then straight to Chicago. But it ended up following the other bus for some dumb reason, and the other bus only had half the people on it. We were packed full and had our bags on top of our laps and everything in our bus overnight and stuff like that, because there's nowhere to put them. Underneath the bus was full, the overheads in the bus were full. It was bad. And then right next to us, they have what they call through bus, basically keeping up with us the whole night. And I think the drivers are friends, and that's why they were doing it. But for the most part, our driver would stop in Toma, Wisconsin, and sit there for an hour waiting on the other bus for no real reason. They didn't take on anybody else or anything. They just waited on each other, which is kind of dumb. And the whole point of express bus is to take you right to Chicago. So, you should be able to get there a couple hours earlier if you're not making all the stops that the through bus is doing, in my opinion. But that's my little rant about that. Greyhound itself tends to be kind of the ghetto of the bus line, even though they're the parent company for all the buses. Jefferson Lines, Trailways, all that. They own all those subsidiaries, or what do they call it? Subsidiaries of Greyhound. They own them all, but they let them all run independently, and thank God they do too, because it seems like Jefferson Lines and even Trailways and everything are better than Greyhound parent company itself, in my opinion. And I would, like I say, if I took a longer flight and everything, I was able to do so. Took a longer trip, I'd fly back instead of taking the bus, because it's just easier and faster to fly back when you get far enough over to like California. It's way easier and time saving to fly back. versus when you're right over there in Minnesota, you know, a day up there to drive, a day back on the bus. That's no real big deal. You know, I'm not gung-ho for the money, so to speak. I'm just, as long as I can afford to do so, I don't need to be all gung-ho about trying to get the next load and trying to get the next money. I just want this to be able to support the current week that I'm in, and so on. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't mind starting to get a hit a little, but lately I bought a bunch of 80-hour stuff, which I don't regret doing because it was on sale, but it's winter clothes, not winter, but more cold weather clothes. But I got them during this time of the season because they're on sale by themselves, you know, because of the fact that it's not winter time. But I'll have to store that, I think. Maybe I'm thinking about renting a storage shed and storing it this summer, just so I don't have to pack clothes around that I don't need. But anyway, because of that, I'm not gonna say behind. I spent the extra that I had. Had I not done that, I would have had, you know, a $700 buffer, roughly. But I figure after I get past this orientation week for Classic, I'm gonna try and take a nice long run for Classic right out the gate. Would be nice if I took a nice long week-long run that goes through and delivers next Monday, following this coming Monday. I might do that and then come back, and by the time, the one good thing about it is I've done all these short runs for everybody else, so by the time I do that, I can come back and do a nice long run for Synergy up to Alaska or Canada or wherever I want. And Pinnacle, I can go clear out to California, or Quality actually has Canada runs. I'm not sure if they got Alaska runs or not, but they have Canada runs that go clear across. And all three of them I've done short runs for while I waited to do Indiana this week, which kind of half-ass screwed me over, but you know, it's just timing-wise. I might have to just wait on them for a month and then see if I have to reapply or what. But when I got to thinking about it, I probably only need about 4 companies. That way I can just work for each company 1 week a month and take a 1 week long trip a month for each, I'm thinking. And then that way I kind of get my ability to pick and choose. That's the main reason I'm signing on for multiple companies, is so I can go down their load boards and pick and choose where I want to go and what I want to do, and it leaves you more options. Synergy is a great one for cushy outfits. Pays on average 80 cents a mile. But the only downside to Synergy is they really only have the one terminal with 3 different lots around the Elkhart and Goshen and Topeka, Indiana area. But all based out of Indiana, and then they take you the nice long one-way trip out to California, or a one-way trip out to Washington, or a one-way trip out to Alaska if you want to do it, but then you're on your own getting back because they don't have any terminals out that way. Pinnacle has rougher outfits to drive. They're decent, but you know, they're box trucks and step vans. They pay more. I haven't really seen a run for them under $1 yet. I've seen lots of runs for $1.06 a mile and $1.10 a mile, so they pay better than Synergy. Lit rougher of a ride. They've got the diesel step vans that are heavier and easier to drive than the Synergy small little gas step van things that they move. But anyway, the deal about Pinnacle is they have a California terminal, they have Indiana, they have New Jersey or someplace like that. They have a couple of them down south. They have Texas, they have Arizona. They have a few of them down south, and that means I can use Pinnacle year-round. And Pinnacle might end up winning out because of that, because I can stay busy with Pinnacle all year-round versus Synergy. If I do Synergy, I have to come back here in the wintertime on foot, which is going to be iffy, because if I don't have the money for a hotel, I'm going to be screwed between, you know, well, not so screwed, because between all 3 of the 4 of these that I'm working for, I got to be able to find somebody that's open that can do a run. I just have to not come back here on a weekend. If I come back here on a weekend and the weekend run that I set up gets screwed up somehow or another, like the parking brake stays on or something, like it had happened to me once, if that happens, then I might be screwed because I can't get a hold of anybody else until Monday. So as long as I pre-plan it in the wintertime to only come back to Elkhart during the weekday, then I won't be as screwed, because I can always call anybody else during 9 to 5 in a week. But Synergy has nice cushy outfits, so I like driving for them because of how cushy the RVs are that they transport. I think in Quality, I haven't taken them yet, but the Quality's cents per mile on the list of stuff that she gave me was only 5 or 6 things she gave me that was shorter runs. I don't know what they pay for longer runs, but theirs was 65 cents a mile, so Quality actually pays less than Synergy, but Quality also does a fuel surcharge on top of the 65 cents a mile, so it actually might end up coming out to be the same as Synergy. I haven't taken it yet to find out, but they paid, I think, 65 cents a mile and then 32 cents a mile. I don't know if it's a mile or what for fuel surcharge, so I'll have to do a trip with them and see how much it ends up actually paying, but this is what they say it paid out. So 530 miles pays $504 altogether when you add in the surcharge and the 65 cents a mile. So when you figure that, it ends up being about 80 cents a mile, same as Synergy, because you do terms of the miles, 530 miles and that. The other thing you got to keep in mind is they pay you city to city or zip code to zip code, so your miles are not going to be exactly what they say, your actual miles. Like this one here is going to be 557 miles that I have to drive because I saw it on the route already. From Quality to Ryder dealership in Burnsville, Minnesota is going to be 557 miles, not the 530 that they say, but that's not a big deal. Adding 25 or 30 miles more, isn't a huge issue that they're not paying me for. As long as they pay me enough to make it worth it, which 504 is enough to make it still worth it. Now, I would bitch and complain and not do it, obviously, if they say they're going to pay 530 miles worth, and then you got to drive 2,000 miles. I'm like, no, it's not happening. I wouldn't be that stupid. Not if you ain't paying me, upwards of $1,800 to $2,000 to do it. But I just wanted to give you the basics of it. And you can see the further you go, the less they end up paying. The Pinnacle, anyway, paid up pretty much even for the miles that they had to run. And that is close to the miles. I think I ran 1,567 miles, I think it was. So 67 miles more than what they paid, but it was pretty close. And then, of course, you got Quality. So that's the three I'm signed up with right now. And I'm trying to add Classic to it next Monday and Tuesday. And eventually I might add Indiana or switch one for the other or something, depending on how they run and where their terminals are at and stuff like that. The two main things that two or three main things that I want is I want a company that has terminals down south, so that in the wintertime I still have work. And I want a company who has cushy rides. And then obviously I want a company that pays the best. So Pinnacle's winning out so far on that, but not the greatest of rides. And Synergy wins out on the greatest of rides thus far. It's just that adaptive cruise I took for Synergy the other day. If they had adaptive cruise all the time, I'd just do that and settle for 80 cents a mile to do that adaptive cruise, because that was awesome. Versus the no cruise, but it pays $1 a mile, or actually it paid like $1.10 a mile. I can't remember now, but it actually paid a little more than that, but they took out the difference in escrow anyway, so I just rounded it down to simple numbers. That's close enough to give you an average of what kind of everything pays in terms of RV transport and transporting box trucks and step vans, and there's shuttle buses and some smaller school buses, Class B's, Class C's, bigger Class A's, stuff like that. And I am still looking for a company, I think Auto Driveaway does it, where they drive the utility trucks, just to drive something that's different. The only reason I haven't done that lately, other than having to do Classic in Indiana here coming up, is because those utility trucks sometimes have nowhere to sleep. I've heard from the rumors that you get there and you're just sleeping in a single cab truck, and if it don't have a combined bench seat, that may not be very comfortable to sleep in. At least in a box truck, you have all the room in the world. You just have to sleep on the floor. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on the trip. If you're getting into RV transporting, I thought I would try and, give you the numbers of what we make out here to see if it's worth your time to come out here and do it. For somebody like me who doesn't have a house or a wife or family or any of that to have to pay extra bills for or anything, this more than does it for me, because I can afford to do the 3 or 4 nights in a hotel room like this on the profit that I make. Like and subscribe, leave comments. Please check out my merchandise below. There's a link below that goes to teespring.com that has my merchandise for the channel. Please check that out. See if you want to buy a hoodie, a shirt, a glass, or anything like that. We'll go to supporting the channel, and then if you're out there wearing it, you'll advertise the channel, hopefully. I'm gonna next week buy a hoodie myself so I can show you when it gets here in a couple weeks. But anyway, like and subscribe, leave comments for Kitchen Flip. Peace.